I've been talking about agendas within comic books, specifically with creators within the industry here on the channel. And I kind of want to start blending some of the stuff here together. We talked about the Bill Sienkiewicz Facebook post where he got very upset that they were changing the lore to Lord of the Rings. I talked about how Alyssa Wong has basically gone into Star Wars with an agenda, gone into Iron Fist with an agenda. Obviously, I've talked about it even more broad than that, but I kind of want to bring it all together for one conclusive kind of conversation with my good friend Doc, the Marvel aficionado himself, the X-Men historian. How you doing, Doc?
I am wonderful. I am happy to be here for your thesis.
Well, it's not my thesis. This is just a conversation about some of the things that I've observed and talked about lately. And I think it's impossible to miss the fact that there's so many mantle swaps going on where you have new characters of more diverse ethnicities and whatnot taking over the mantles of other heroes that have been longstanding sellers within comic books. A lot of sexuality changes, a lot of big changes to characters and mantles that are going on with comic books. And one of the things I don't like about it, Doc, and one of the things that does bother me is that they're going in here and stealing other people's creations, as in the original creators. And they're also stealing the characters that a lot of fans have attached themselves to and kind of running them off so that they could make their statement about what they think is happening within society. But they don't have the balls a lot of the times. A lot of the bad creators don't have the sack to go out there and just do it with their own characters, like Bill Sienkiewicz had said.
I think this also does go with reinforcing the lazy and stupid, that they are unable to do it with their own characters, mostly because they don't have the talent to do so. So what's the easiest way to do it? Ride the coattails of something that somebody else made successful, get your point across that way, or just use it as a mouthpiece to argue your point without giving any sort of credence to any dissenting viewpoints.
You know what's interesting is, Tom Taylor, I know you're not a fan because of what he did in X-Men Red, what he did with All New Wolverine. He definitely was not a very good creator over at Marvel, but he has had some success. And in my opinion, he has had some very stellar comics over at DC that have been really outstanding just as far as the quality, really getting to the heart of the characterization. But it feels like now that they've elevated him up, even though he's a talented writer, he's like lowered himself down to the level of all these other failed creators, specifically with John Kent. We heard him when he talked about it. He said, I didn't want my Superman to be like another white savior. He went into it specifically with the agenda and he spelled it out, and it has absolutely destroyed his ability to write good comic books.
And he didn't want to create another white savior because he wanted to be the white savior. He needed to elevate him to a certain status by giving him the Superman name. But
I don't think he really wanted to elevate John Kent. I think he wanted to elevate himself.
Yes,
that's why he was on CNN. Himself. That's why he's doing all these interviews.
Yeah, he wanted to make himself the white savior. So good job, I guess. God forbid there's any flaws, because then he will get attacked for being homophobic by the same people he wants to get white savior status from. And then he loses his white savior status. So, good job. Enjoy your catch-22. Enjoy the prison you built for yourself.
It's kind of weird. They almost become like a self-licking ice cream cone where they're only there to service themselves. The comic books aren't there to service the customers. And you get this really weird market where the ideas really aren't flowing out and they're not really compelling people to come in and read a whole lot of comic books. I think that's why we're seeing a mass exodus. That's why DC and Marvel are having to go heavy in the paint with a lot of marketing gimmicks that don't really rely on the quality of the storytelling that's going on. And I think you're right about not being able to show characters in certain demographics as having any faults, because if you treated a black character or a gay character as just another character, just another person that needs to be fleshed out, rather than a symbol that needs to be uplifted and used as like kind of a mouthpiece or a bullhorn for other points of view or other agendas that you're trying to get in there. And when you do that, it kind of just actually shines a light on your own, views on these people that gays are so marginalized. I couldn't show a gay character with a fault. I feel so bad for black people. I could never show a black person like being violent. It's like, maybe that's your problem. Maybe that's not the rest of society.
We see it when I mean, I guess you could say less politically active, just normie creators have historically written characters. Maybe they approach a racial or gender or sexual preference stereotype. We're now seeing them getting dragged 20 years later for being homophobic or racist or whatever. And Tom Taylor, being the woke white savior he is, he can't risk that status by getting those same accusations hurled on him by the same people that just want to destroy everything and find complaint everywhere. So therefore, he just has to write perfect characters, and perfect characters are fucking boring.
Well, I wouldn't say they end up being perfect. They end up being really bad stereotypes. There aren't really a whole lot of healthy representations of gay characters. They're kind of all the exact same character. Almost every black male character that's been introduced in comic books in the last 5 or 10 years is essentially a carbon copy almost of the exact same character. So I think it's made a less healthy comic book environment as far as diversity, because you're really getting these cookie cutter versions of the same characters over and over again. And I think it ends up becoming, quite boring, and there's not a whole lot of fun to be had in the stories that are going in there. And it's just, I think it's so strange, but it does say a lot about the character or the quality of the writers that they know that they can't go out in the marketplace of ideas and create these characters and spew these ideas out with their own things that they would own a piece of. They can only do it with somebody else's creation that they really don't have any stake in as far as monetarily or whatever, because they don't mind destroying somebody else's creation, but they're not going to destroy their creation. It's like, unless it's like a Steve Orlando.
Well, he's
the only one that I've really seen do that to his own stuff.
Well, not only do they not want to ruin their own characters, they need to coattail ride, not only because they don't want to destroy their own characters, but because they know nobody would fucking buy it if it didn't have some already known commodity name attached to it.
That does make me kind of respect certain creators a little bit more. I have to give, Brian K. Vaughan with Saga, there are definitely some ideas that don't really appeal to me, but he's executing them at such a level, and he's doing it with his own idea and his own creation, and people responded to it because he's actually a really good writer. Kieran Gillen, I know you and I disagree about the quality of his storycraft, but he's been able to go out there, and create Wicked Divine, Die, and some other series that are, their original series. Once and Future obviously goes into some Arthurian history or lore and stuff, but he's creating original materials that are getting these ideas out there, and people are accepting them. So there are people that are looking for this material, but they also want the quality, just like every other comic book fan in the world. Nobody wants to go out there and just to spend money for a product to say you support something. In the long term, they might do a sale here or a sale there, but eventually, there has to be the quality there. And that's really what's lacking, and one of the reasons these things aren't taking. But I think one of the reasons those qualities aren't being brought to bear on these characters and into the market with the big two is because the writers they really don't care, because they don't own anything.
If they fail, if they ruin something, if it permanently renders an IP basically radioactive, they don't have to go and try creating something else. And honestly, they don't even think that it really reflects that badly back on them.
I think Bendis is finding out right now that going to DC and ruining your reputation as a creator is likely affecting his sales, at Dark Horse with his new creator-owned stuff quite
with
dramatically.
All Jinx World, he spent the better part of a decade ruining all of his own reputation. So, I mean,
what's interesting about Bendis? A lot of people will point to him and they're like, well, he created Miles Morales. That's where the newer, more diverse versions of characters that's really gotten over. I guarantee you he hasn't made a lot of money off that, even with the end of the Spider-Verse movie, because he didn't create Spider-Man. It's just a derivative of Spider-Man himself. So even though you could say that Brian Michael Bendis' Miles Morales is a success story that is translated outside of comic books, with video games, in movies and whatnot, it's not like he made any money. So really the risk for a creator to go in like an Alyssa Wong going in there with an Iron Fist or on Star Wars, like a Tom Taylor to go in there and do these things with Superman are really low, Because even if it works out, you're not costing yourself a whole lot of money. And if it doesn't work out, you didn't own the character to begin with. It's no skin off your back.
Anytime somebody wants to trot out the Miles example as success, I point to the fact that it was one of the first attempts at it that was done with legitimate reasoning and storycraft behind it. If that was done today, it'd flop miserably. No one would remember who Miles was in 6 months. But you're right. They don't have any fear of ruining the characters. There's just, it doesn't, and honestly, half the time, it doesn't even hurt their chance to get another, gig on a different book. They can ruin,
because Marvel and DC continuously just hire the same shitty writers over and over. Look at what Cena Grace did, not only to Iceman. You talk about one of the worst selling, big two comics in modern history. Burned every bridge they had to Marvel Comics, like flamed CB Cebulski, flamed off their entire editorial staff by saying they were all pieces of shit and they didn't support him. What's Cena Grace doing now? Not getting a whole lot of writing gigs at DC, but he is writing at DC.
They will still land on their feet because anyone that's any better than them will cost more and probably will end up in an industry that pays better than, and that is more, I guess you could say, respected than comics.
I disagree with you on this one, Doc, because I happen to know a lot better comic book writers than Cena Grace that really can't get an opportunity at DC or Marvel and would like it. And the reason that they can't is because they don't align with the agenda and the purpose of really the editorial staff, where I think that's where a lot of the problems at DC and Marvel start. I don't even think it's really with Jim Lee or CB Cebulski. I think it starts with the group editors and the editors below them, because they're the ones really doing the hiring. And as long as they're in the good graces of the editors and they did what the editors wanted them to do, whether they took the fall for it or not, for the most part, I think they're golden. It takes them kind of a long time to really burn that bridge. Just recently, I guess within the last couple of years, Mags Visagio finally burned their bridge. Think about all the stuff Mags had to do before that finally happened. Had to threaten to beat every single Marvel and DC customer in the face with a baseball bat that was, cisgender. Basically, threw Sean Gordon Murphy on the bus, said he was love bombing him, did a lot of really crazy, nasty things to people within comic books, and was still getting, some limited opportunities.
I don't know if it's necessarily a stated objective. It's not. I don't even think it is a conscious. I think it is a very, very simple unconscious bias that they only hire people that view the world the same way.
I don't think it's unconscious
them.
At all. I think it's absolutely by design.
Okay, yeah, well,
a lot of them, not all of them.
Yeah,
I do think there are absolutely editors out there, and Alana Smith, who just got promoted over at Marvel, Heather Ontos, who just got promoted over at IDW. Look what Heather Ontos did as one of the big influencers over at Valiant Comics. Basically, if Richard C. Meyer had offended you or talked bad about you, you got a job whether you could write or draw or not. And it just takes sales. They haven't recovered. Yeah.
Okay. Fine. I will accept that. I think that a lot of the writers, they just do what they're told. They know that they don't have to put any effort in. All they know is how they have to appease the editorial staff. The editors don't seem to give a shit. They don't ever get fired. I think it's because no one else will work for the peanuts they're being paid.
Yeah, they don't get paid.
So they get an opportunity to claim that they work in comics. They get a chance to influence the comics, the direction of the industry. They don't have,
and in their minds, that means they're going to influence movies eventually, right? Because we're seeing all these ideas come into the MCU. So I guess in some effects, it worked out just how they thought. So now that's influencing popular culture, and that's influencing the mainstream.
Yep. They're looking at it as, hey, we can advance our agenda, mostly because we're too dumb to understand what anyone else is arguing. They want to ignore any valid criticisms of any competing agendas. And they're just too dumb to bother to figure out what even those arguments are. That's why
I think they know what the arguments are. I think they just ignore them. Like, there's no need to. It's not like DC or Marvel holding their own people accountable.
Well, that's fair. I mean, I look, even I try to give some degree of, you know, validity to, you know, Hanlon's razor here, that do not automatically attribute to malice that which could equally be explained by ignorance or stupidity. And these are a bunch of idiots too. So it's hard for me to not just go with these people are just fucking dumb, but at the same time, they always end up dumb in the same direction. So there's got to be some degree of intentional social engineering, I guess you could say, or attempts at social engineering, or just the fact that they get off on ruining shit that other people like.
Well, I think that's what the creators kind of get at it. You could do something so stupid and outrageous and destructive to a character, but it's not your character. So you have carte blanche to go out and ruin other people's things, costing other people's estates and families and them themselves, potentially lucrative money down the road when these things could be adapted by ruining stuff that they own. But it does, there's no cost to you as far as your reputation really within the industry itself. You lose some reputation with the customers. But I think, it's a lot easier to go steal somebody else's thing and destroy it than go and take these changes and go and execute them like a Brian K. Vaughan or like a Kieran Gillen have actually done. It'd be easy to go and follow their footsteps, but you actually have to be a good writer. I don't think very many of them have it in them. So
they're looking at Marvel and DC as, well, fuck it. They have insurance. It's fine to watch it get burned down. They're insured. Disney's there.
Well, I think a lot of the writers don't have long-term goals of working in comic books. I think everybody wants to make the jump to another medium, but that is a conversation for another day. I do want to say thank you very much to Doc for joining me on this conversation. Do you have any final words as we wrap this up?
I think you got a bunch of idiots with a really stupid agenda. It's kind of a perfect storm of stupidity and agenda.
If you're looking for a more specific example, what Doc and I were talking about, I did make this video about Alyssa Wong where she goes in details about how she was queering, making Star Wars super gay, also about some of the reasoning behind changing Iron Fist. And you can tell it has nothing to do with the character or their love of comics. If you haven't seen this, it's really eye-opening about some of the real bad things going on in comics today.